Okay, guys, good morning. Thanks for joining me today. We're kind of in a big group here, and we all have the same concerns and are feeling the same stress from what is going on with the storm here. We're going to be trying to break down everything. Obviously, those of you who are paying attention noticed what has happened overnight, and let me pop that up. And then what I'm going to do is also take that crawl off the bottom of the screen there, because what that is, that's the earlier advisory, and I'd like to get us staged for the 11 a.m. advisory so that it pops up right when it comes in. So basically, if you've been following along and watching carefully here, you can see that the storm has wobbled a little bit to the right here. Now, is it a wobble or is it a turn? Because it's going to make a big difference going forward here. It could be a wobble, or it could have been like kind of a turn that has stopped turning. In other words, it's this motion and then this motion and then that motion, kind of a series of turns there. Hurricanes have this internal wobble that they always do, especially when they get strong. The center will kind of wobble around there. We call it trochoidal oscillation. But one of the things that when we talk about a wobble here, so a wobble is where it's going straight, then it kind of deviates a little bit, and then it's going straight again, almost on the same track that it was before, and then it deviates again, and then it resumes its track again. Maybe little slight variations to the right, but basically it's kind of gradually taking it to the right, but it's not all at once, not like a turn. And in my book, a turn is more of this kind of motion that basically goes like that. So obviously this is going to have implications, because any motion that is to the right of the forecast track is going north-south. Any motion that is to the right of that does bring the impacts closer to Florida. The red line there, that was the 5 a.m. advisory track. So that was the center line. So we kind of use that as a reference here. So how are we doing against the 5 a.m. track? Well, we're getting to the east of the 5 a.m. track. That's getting out of what we were forecasting based on the Hurricane Center's 5 a.m. advisory. And we, just from a planning and preparedness point of view, we like everything to be fairly predictable. Ian has been anything but predictable. And we've been talking about this very, very large uncertainty. I'll go more into that in detail as we wait for the 11 o'clock advisory there. You can also see here the eye wall. It's becoming more defined there. The eye wall is the worst part of the hurricane. Now, when I'm talking about a hurricane, this is the part that we want to avoid, that you don't want this part to come over you. This is the tornado-like winds, but they're very wide. The last indication I saw, and I haven't seen a hurricane hunter, well, reconnaissance is going to be getting in there now that it's coming off of Cuba. Reconnaissance doesn't do reconnaissance over land. So the last one I saw was 20 miles wide for the eye. So picture like the eye being 20 miles wide, but then right outside of that is this 15-mile wide ring of just intense winds. So you've got basically about a 40 to 50 mile wide tornado. We're not talking about the diameter of the eye, but the whole eye wall itself. That's what we're going to be watching very closely, because for people who end up in the path of that, they need to do everything they can to shelter in place and reinforce their structure ahead of time. That's why we've got this hurricane warning up now, and I'm going to go through all the details of that. So when we talk about getting hit, that's what I think of when we talk about getting hit. All of us are going to feel the effects of Ian. All of us are. We're feeling it already with the rain in South Florida. We've had one tornado warning in the Upper Keys near Tavernier. We've had some gusty winds in the Keys as well, tropical storm gusts, and the rain is working its way to the north. But all of us are going to feel the effects. But when we talk about being hit, that's the part that I'm talking about there with being hit. So let's zoom out here and kind of show you a bit bigger picture here. A pretty good squall now. This big band here on the east side of Ian there. Let me zoom out a little bit more, and I'm going to actually stop the loop here, so we've got kind of a picture that we can all look at here. So there's the core. That's the part that you don't want to be hit by, but there are these now bigger bands, spiral bands, starting to arc out away from it. And these are going to contain some stronger winds, at least this first band is. Possibility of tornadoes as well. And the thing about hurricane-related tornadoes is usually the visibility is restricted, and so it's something that you may not even see it coming. You have to just get to the interior room of your house right away. But these bands are going to continue to work their way north, as the center goes to the north. You can see there kind of that's the 12-hour forecast position, that's the 24-hour forecast position. You can see that Ian is already to the right. Now, is it going to parallel that course right there, or is it going to continue to bend away from the forecast track? We don't know. Some of the models were showing sharper turns. I know a lot of fans of the icon. Because so many people post and talk about the icon, I emailed the developer in Germany. It's a German model, and it does very well with European weather. It's a global model, so you can get tropical information from it. But as I discussed with the modeler there, one of the creators of the model, they don't have skill score on it. So in other words, they haven't kept enough track to see if it does well or if it doesn't do well. I know people post it and say, look, the icon had this, but we don't know if that's because it's good at having right turns or if it's just a lucky guess in this case. So I don't show the icon, I don't reference the icon because it's just one of those things that it's out there, we see it, but we don't know how it compares to the other models. All right, so let's move on. I talk about, first off, a little bit about our chances for severe weather here. Once again, we're waiting on the new advisory. And let me just remind everybody while we're waiting on the new advisory, before the advisory gets in, because then we'll be really busy, is that if you like what you're seeing, be sure to push like, be sure to subscribe, be sure to get notifications, and that helps elevate this video so others can see it. I didn't realize that when I first found out about doing YouTube live, so who knew? All right, so here's what's going on in South Florida, and what I've got turned on here are what are called storm markers. So they're in the lower keys, and they're almost hard to see, but there's these little yellow things here that indicates rotation in the clouds, and these triangles here, these upside down triangles, that's stronger rotation. So those could be possible water spouts there. So as you can see, the atmosphere is becoming more favorable for the development of tornadoes, water spouts, things like that. That's the keys with this next big band coming up. Here in South Florida, we're still kind of on this lighter rain, not a lot of wind yet. This is fairly typical as the hurricane is getting closer. Sometimes you can have just this steady rain. Unfortunately, it accumulates, the steady rain does, and sets the stage for additional rain causing flooding. So you can see also here a few storm markers there. There's a yellow one indicates a stronger rotation, that little cell there that is to the southeast of Biscayne Bay and Elliott Key. So this is something we're going to be watching here, and once again, as the storm center gets farther to the north, then we're going to probably see more indications of rotation as well as possible tornadoes and water spouts. And you can see there, that's what we call the velocity data, and so what we look for is red and green close together, and that one little guy right there, it has some red, some greens indicating some stronger winds. We're also able to do something, I'm also able to do something called shear markers, watching the shear there. And so that kind of gives us an overview of where we're seeing rotation. And then we have something called shear tracks, which kind of shows where the stronger rotation is. And you can see it there. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as we go forward here, and possibility of any tornadoes with that. So here's what's happened. And now I put all my videos, they're here on YouTube. I put them on my website, craigsetzer.com. We've been talking about this for days, and I know there's a lot of people that may be just joining now, and it's like, what's going on here? Why didn't we talk more about the uncertainty in this turn and stuff? We have been talking about it for days, that there's the possibility that because of this dip in the jet stream here, we could get some influence some steering influence to the east, which would basically turn the storm more to the northeast. For the time being, it's been under the control of this blocking high. So that's through the Wednesday morning there. Actually, I wanted to back up a little bit. Let me back up a little bit. So there we are. It's Tuesday already, isn't it? Wow, time flies. I don't know if you're probably losing track of time too, right? So it's been under the influence of this blocking high, which has been trying to turn it and lift it to the north. And you can see that outlined really well. The jet stream dip has helped erode the high here. So it's not as effective up there farther to the north and near Florida. And the jet stream dip as well is also adding a westerly or southwesterly push to the storm, especially at the higher levels. That's going to do several things. One, it's going to want to try to make the storm wobble or turn to the right. What the models are having a hard time with is how well is the jet stream dip modeled, and how well is the model handling how the storm is affected by the jet stream dip. If that jet stream dip wasn't there and we were just riding around the high like we did with Irma, the models would be very reliable, very certain, but that's not been the case thanks to the jet stream dip here, which happens to be moving out just as the storm is approaching. Also, the wind shear from the jet stream dip will likely tend to weaken the storm more quickly as it gets farther to the north, depending on where that is. But also it's going to tend to make it lopsided. So the worst of the weather, all the heavy rain and the winds are going to want to tend to be blown over Florida. So basically it's like the storm is round now, but with the southwest winds blowing on it, as it gets farther north, then all that bad weather kind of gets blown east and the storm becomes lopsided. So we'll expect to see that. Now, one of the indications we're going to see for wind shear is how it shows up on the satellite. Let me just quickly pop up the satellite here. We'll be able to see on the satellite that the center starts to fill in. You can see a very clear satellite eye there, some lightning on the northern eye wall there. Once the center starts to to cloud in, as well as we start to see this western side erode, that's an indication that the shear is starting to take place. The models this morning, we would want them to just be right on top of each other. There's still some spread, still some uncertainty, and because now we're running out of time here, there's not a lot of time between that point there and that point there. The model possibilities are starting to narrow down. This is the European, and you can see it's to the right of the 5 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. And the GFS was pretty much over the Hurricane Center's forecast track, although that red thick line there, that is the GFS. The other lines are the ensemble. So it's a little bit to the right of the Hurricane Center position as well. So kind of the things we know here is that the center is right of the present track. The models, many of them, are now right of the Hurricane Center's forecast track. So the expectation would be that the track is going to shift to the east. And that has big implications. That's why I think this 11 a.m. advisory is going to be a very important advisory, a very big advisory. And we're all going to get probably, there's no good news in this advisory. That's what I'm afraid the lesson might be. Now, a shift of the track to the right, it's too early to speculate. Does that take areas from, say, north of Tampa Bay with lower potential? You don't want to ever say with a hurricane, you're in it or you're out of it, because the hurricane's a big system. It has edges to it that extend out. So everybody's being affected by the hurricane, but not everybody's going to get the core of the hurricane, and that's what we're most concerned about. We're also concerned about the flood potential. It is, I would say, on the high to extreme side, especially since the wind currents begin to stall here. Let's go back and let me just advance our graphic on the wind currents there. So there's the two blocks. So once the jet stream dip moves on out, then the steering currents become very light. And that's problematic for a couple of reasons, because, and there you can see that's the Thursday, Friday time frame. So the jet stream dip has moved out, and now the block is trying to build back in over it. So the steering currents become very light, and it's problematic because it stalls the storm, and also, or tends to stall the storm, slow it way, way down. That's in the forecast. And also it makes the forecasting where it's going to go a little bit more uncertain, like we need any more uncertainty at this point. So it's 10:55. Once again, we are waiting on the new advisory, and once again, the second it comes in, we'll hear a ping. I will roll our advisory open, and then we will take a look at it. And every little blip, because I'm getting also information, here I'll show you, information from the hurricane hunters, as well as other information. So all those little lines up there, that's what we call high density observations. That's from the NOAA plane, NOAA 42, which is a P3, and it's flying along there, and it's giving us, every 30 seconds, it's giving us some observations from what's going on there. So that's where we stand. Some quick questions here. Let's see what's going on, see what some folks are thinking. Okay, there's the advisory. So let's get right to it. Okay, so first off, and I'll read some of the headlines here, the storm surge warning has been issued for the east coast of Florida from the mouth of the St. Mary's River, so that's Jacksonville, including St. John's River, and the Dry Tortugas along the Florida west coast St. Mary's River, okay, so Marineland, Florida, to the mouth of the St. Mary's River. And let me make sure I've got all these other warnings right. The public advisory is still coming in. So let me read this forecast advisory here. And you'll see it pop up here on the screen as well when it comes in. Hurricane watch is now in effect for the west coast of Florida from south of Bonita Beach to Chokolaski. So the hurricane watch now has been extended south. That will include Marco Island as well as Naples under a hurricane watch. A storm surge watch has been issued for the mouth of the northeast Florida also. Tropical storm warning along the east coast has been extended north up to Georgia. And the tropical storm watch is now in effect for south of Boca Raton to Flamingo. So now all of Miami-Dade and Broward and the Upper Keys are under a tropical storm watch. So then the changes with this advisory, tropical storm watch now for Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, Broward, Upper Keys, tropical storm warnings in effect for the Middle Keys, the Lower Keys. Let me see if there's any changes to the Lower Keys just to make sure here. Tropical storm warning. Yeah, Lower and Middle Keys still tropical storm warning. Hurricane watch is in effect in the west coast, and that's been extended back to the southwest. And once again, the tropical storm watch for the Upper Keys, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beaches, and up to the north. So we can go through part of the advisory here because we have enough information to go through it. So let's talk about it here. Winds 115 miles an hour, Category 3. The motion there says north at 10, but the motion is a little bit to the east of due north, right? We know that already. Let me see if I can find that exact motion here. So 5 degrees. So if you look at a compass, it's 360 degrees. 5 degrees is just off, just slightly east of due north. It is almost due north. But remember, the Hurricane Center takes averages there in terms of where the storm is moving. That kind of dampens out the little wobbles. So let's go forward here to our first point there. There is the 8 p.m. this evening time frame there. You can see the tropical storm conditions forecast to extend up into the Middle Keys. Remember, Middle and Lower Keys under the tropical storm warning, where the expectation is tropical storm conditions will be experienced. Upper Keys, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach under the tropical storm watch, where there's the possibility of tropical storm conditions. Let's move forward here into time, and you can see this is the closest approach to the Keys. The track now showing kind of a north-northeast motion there, and that's going to bring the worst of the conditions closer to the Keys as well, but still kind of on the edge there. All right, there is the Wednesday at 8 a.m., and you can see the hurricane conditions according to this advisory, the 11 a.m. advisory, now approaching Fort Myers, also approaching Naples, and to the south of Sarasota there. Forecast intensity is still Category 4. All right, here we are, and let me move that a little bit forward here so we get that next point there. So that is Wednesday, 8 p.m., so tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. The center is approaching the coast, and this track shift is to the south here. So where earlier the line was over Tampa Bay, now the center of the forecast points is down to the south. There's still uncertainty. A wobble or a little deviant motion back to the left could still bring the impact, the core of the storm, back up there to the Tampa Bay area. Let me just say this. The Big Bend, places in North Florida, may be feeling a little bit better. Tampa Bay, I would be feeling better. This is way, way, way too close. Also, it's going to be a bigger storm with a growing wind field, and all the way down through Naples and Marco Island, even farther south to the southwest coast. Certainly feeling worse about the situation there with this little deviation to the right. Here in South Florida, now you can see the tropical storm winds. They have spread out, and you can see they are just touching almost the coast there. So that's why the tropical storm watch extended for Broward, Miami-Dade, and the Upper Keys as well. So that's Wednesday evening there. And sometimes what happens with a hurricane is that the winds are kind of lopsided on it. So we're not seeing a lot of wind over mainland South Florida right now. And my experience from hurricanes is that once the storm gets closer, the winds come up, and then the winds last longer as the storm's going away. The wind distribution is kind of lopsided. I think that might be the case in this case. So it's going to definitely be windy on Wednesday, and could even be windy on Thursday in southeast Florida, southwest Florida. This is a very close call, and folks in Naples, Collier County, Lee County, you guys need to kind of act quickly now to get things ready. The lesson, of course, from Charlie Though I was here in 2004, I worked Charlie. I remember it in vivid detail. We had a small Category 3 storm that came off of Cuba in a similar location. It started turning to the right. It intensified to Category 4. I remember even the hurricane specialist, Stacy Stewart, putting out the special advisory early that afternoon as Charlie was turning to the right. And a lot of folks, unfortunately, were caught kind of off guard, even though folks were in the cone where the center could go, were caught off guard with that right turn of Charlie. Don't get caught off guard again in Southwest Florida. From Marco Island, basically even from Chokoloskee, Flamingo, north through Naples, all the way up through Bonita Beach, Bonita Springs, Fort Myers, Coral Springs, all the way up through Tampa Bay. Don't get caught off guard, and don't focus too much on that last point here at 11 a.m. Remember, it's been moving around a bit, so it could move some more. It could shift back to the left here. It's just too early to tell right now, so that's why it's a bigger than normal area that has to prepare. Okay, let's go forward a little bit more here. There is the Thursday morning 8 a.m. position. You can see the speed has slowed tremendously from Wednesday evening to Thursday morning. That's the collapsing wind steering currents that we were talking about, and the intensity is coming down, but still a hurricane. You can see the hurricane conditions spreading up through Pasco, Hernando, as well as possibly Citrus County here, and coming into Orlando now, and extending well to the east through Polk County on down through Lee County there into Fort Myers, and also coming into a bit into Naples there and Collier County. So just because, remember, you're not under that line or under that center point there, the forecast point, the storm's big. Let's talk briefly. I need to give my, and I do this every time I'm on, my reminder that the cone, and I think everybody's going to start repeating after me, the cone only tracks a point. The cone only tracks a point. The cone is a great tool for tracking points, but a hurricane is not a point. A hurricane is large and has hazards that extend well beyond the point. That's why I created this graphic to kind of show the extent of the winds there. You can see here, even the hurricane winds are extending out of the cone. So if you're in Naples and you're like, well, the cone is moving away from us, it's shifting away. Actually, the storm effects are getting closer to you in Naples. It is not shifting away in Naples. And you can see also here that the tropical storm conditions extend well outside of the cone there. So, and I think I've got my cursor locked. Okay, there we go. So, so that's the advisory through 8 a.m. on Thursday. Let's move forward here a little more in time. There's 8 p.m. Thursday, still moving slow. Forecast, I think that point there is either tropical storm or it's Category 1 hurricane. It might be tropical storm. So those of you in Orlando in 2004, remember that Charlie, when it hit, and I'm not saying this is going to be identical to Charlie, but there are similarities and lessons to take away from this. That, by the way, that little ping was a reminder that the flood watch remains in effect for the Keys. The lesson from Charlie was that it was a compact storm, and it stayed together as a hurricane. And after it went through Punta Gorda and Charlotte County, rode right up US 17 there and right into Orlando. And Orlando had hurricane force winds in 2004 from a storm that made landfall, 100 miles away, 150 miles away, from quite a ways away. So, so it's more about the lesson than the storm, right? But the lesson from Charlie was you need to make preparations outside of the cone in this case, because the cone doesn't show where the impacts are going to go. That's through Friday, and then you can see now. Look at this. There is and this is why the hurricane watch, I think, has been issued up here, because look at that. The hurricane force wind threat has now increased here off the northeast coast of Florida, and there's also the possibility of storm surge threat there as well. All right, here are the latest watches and warnings, and unfortunately, these take a time to update. I don't know why, but for some reason, some of these warnings are issued by the local offices of the National Weather Service, and so they have to get the advisory. They get the advisory, and then they make their adjustments, and then they issue a statement that updates those. So we'll probably come back and revisit this, but these warnings have been extended, and so I don't want to dwell too long on this graphic because those warnings have been extended, and you can see storm surge watch now for the northeast part of Florida, and the storm surge warning has been extended south here. It doesn't really show up there, but it has been extended onto the south. All right, let's talk briefly about time of arrival, and then we'll pause to answer a few questions. So the tropical storm conditions, and this threshold here is based on the kind of a combination between the earliest arrival possibility and the most likely arrival. So we'll just call it the ETA of the tropical storm conditions. And you can see they are to the west of Key West there, but they are approaching the lower Keys. And I've been seeing messages from the lower Keys that have been reporting tropical storm conditions, wind gusts of 48 miles an hour at Key West International Airport there at 10:09 a.m. So we're seeing tropical storm gusts, and then the steadier tropical storm conditions will set in later on this afternoon. Here we go through time. So Naples, folks on the west coast, you need to wrap things up as soon as possible. It's no longer, you need to have it done by sunset. It's wrap things up as soon as possible. And you can see the tropical storm conditions there. That's tonight. They're getting closer to southeast Florida, Miami-Dade and Broward. The winds are coming up, and it's going to be, let me back up there, kind of jumped ahead. It's going to be very windy tomorrow. Now, I mentioned this on Twitter. So kind of, what do you think of in terms of storm impacts from the wind? The red areas, of course, it's shutter because you could have structural damage to your home. In the orange area, which is the hurricane watch, the recommendation would be to shutter because the possibility of hurricane force winds. And so the recommendation would be to shutter. In storm surge areas, of course, you want to get out of those. You want to evacuate those, flee the water, hide from the wind. In the tropical storm areas, there's the possibility of more widespread power outages in the tropical storm warning areas. In the tropical storm watch areas, there's the possibility of sporadic power outages, mainly from some smaller trees coming down, ficus trees and stuff like that. Typically, we think of course, tropical storm warning is the expectation of winds sustained at 40 miles an hour and gusts over 60, almost like a severe thunderstorm. And the tropical storm watch is the possibility of those winds over 40 miles an hour with gusts over 60. So that's kind of the way it shakes out there. All right, let's go back to our timeline here, and you can see the tropical storm conditions continuing to spread into southeast Florida during the day tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a nasty day in southeast Florida and a very, very bad day on the west coast from southwest Florida all the way up the coast. Keys also, look at this, the Keys. So Key West, you're basically in the tropical storm conditions from sunset this evening through, it's going to be probably sunset tomorrow. So for folks in the southern half of Florida, once this gets going, it's going to take some time for it to get on out, mainly because the storm is slowing down. And you can see there we are, 7 a.m. Thursday now on our timeline here. And the center there slowing down, and the winds, tropical storm winds, continuing to move to the northeast. They begin to shrink a little bit because the storm is weakening, but still enough of a storm there to get onto the north. That is a what's called a vortex data message. That's from the hurricane hunters there. I'll pop that up real quickly here. And that information there was taken at, what was the time there? So 14:27. So that was 10:27 this morning, and that was a recon fix. Now, the interesting thing here is that there is this line G. I'll point this out for those of you who are still hanging on here. You're hanging on to hopefully get a little bit of good information. So this C18 that's showing up right there, that C18 is the observation of the center of the storm, of the eye characteristics of the storm. C means that it's circular. Let me go back to it there. And 18 is the diameter there. So that is a fairly tight hurricane. The eye is likely contracting because it's getting stronger, and so certainly that's something that's expected, but not good. As it gets closer to the coast during the day tomorrow and later tonight, we'll be watching that. We can also see it on radar, how wide the eye is, and that will kind of tell us in terms of how wide that hurricane wind field, the core, is going to be. Now, as the storm weakens, of course, and the core intensity comes down a little bit, still a major hurricane, but comes down a little bit, that wind field begins to spread out gradually. It's still sharpest near the eye wall and in the eye wall, but then begins to spread out gradually after that. So let me put one more thing back up here and just kind of reiterating where we are and the new track cone here. and then we'll answer some questions here. So that's it. You can see the new forecast track there over the next 24 hours. It is in that general direction. So we're going to be watching closely here now. Does the center there, does the eye on the radar continue to deviate or wobble to the right of that line? Because that is going to continue to push impacts, severe impacts, farther into southwest Florida, potentially stronger impacts in the lower Keys, and potentially stronger winds, of course, here in southeast Florida, and then downstream central Florida and west Florida. Still, uncertainty is high, but of course the confidence is high enough that there is at least a substantial hurricane threat that that area is watching, of course, very closely. So let's see. Yes, so tropical storm watch for Pompano Beach. Let me check on that because, all right, that's what we talked about, right? Tropical storm watch for Pompano Beach, and that's the notification that went out. That is consistent with what with what I mentioned, that the Palm Beach, which was under a tropical storm watch, now Broward and Miami-Dade in the Upper Keys under tropical storm watches. So it's a watch, meaning the possibility. It's not a warning. Miami-Dade, Broward, Upper Keys, and Palm Beach County, a watch. So let's see what some of the folks are saying now and try to get caught up here. A little bit of a long stream there. So lots of good mornings. Good mornings to you guys. GFS was sitting over Tampa for like a day. Yeah, that's the big flood side of this. Wherever the storm ends up and slows down is the big threat there. Let's see, what else are folks saying? Boom, boom, boom. Checking here. East trend, right? Whole peninsula. That's right. We'll feel the effects. Yep, looks like Charlie, which remember, it may not be exactly like Charlie, but the lesson from Charlie was that all along the southwest coast was in the threat zone, and this is the case this time too. So folks on the west coast, you need to wrap things up. Or if you're in a storm surge zone in Naples, get out all the way up through Fort Myers. If you are in the hurricane warning area and you're not in the storm surge zone, you're in the hurricane warning area. If you're not in the storm surge zone, then you need to shutter up your house as soon as possible, especially because the weather is going to be deteriorating through this afternoon. Let's see, Ian looking more and more like North Fort Myers. So you know, we don't want to really call towns and cities yet. This is this whole, what I call this whole certainty thing on the forecast cone, where it kind of narrows. In other words, right now we're talking about specifics in terms of southwest Florida, west central Florida, for the most specific potential for intense threats, and then as we get closer here, then we'll kind of narrow it down, maybe counties. Then we might be able to say Sarasota, maybe Manatee, as well as Lee and Collier. And then once it gets closer, and this is the tomorrow time frame, then we're talking about specific communities where you guys are going to be the ones that need to really hunker down, shelter in place, and stay safe. Let's see. It still looks like Polk County is not out of it at all. Highlands County, counties to the south of Tampa Bay, not out of it all, southeast. So of course there's storm surge implications with where the center goes. The problem is you can't really plan. You can't say, oh, we're going to have storm surge here but not here, so in 6 hours we should leave and we shouldn't leave. The problem with the hurricane is that there's so much uncertainty. A lot of people have to leave. Not everybody's going to see storm surge. The people that are near where the storm makes landfall and to the south of that are going to see the worst storm surge. But because of evacuations, they take time. We have to evacuate larger areas than normal, and our hurricane models obviously just aren't good enough to get all those details, those fine details that we would need to see. So that's just an update, as a correction actually on the vortex message from the hurricane hunters. A little bit more, Broward is in a watch, to reiterate there. Hi from Key West, glad to have you tune in. Glad to have all of you tuning in. Let's see what else. Miami-Dade closed tomorrow and Thursday. I will encourage everybody to check to verify that. I know there was a lot of pressure on the schools to do something. So you know what? It's always better to err on the side of caution, right? Yep, the weather notification. A lot of folks got the weather notification for the tropical storm watch. Yeah, Cuba, unfortunately, the worst of it is Pinar del Rio. I visited the Institute of Meteorology in Cuba and talked to the folks there. And one of the good things about the way that the Institute of Meteorology handles hurricanes is that they basically say they come in, the military does, and I know I don't want to cause a bunch of controversy here, but they tell people you have to evacuate. We cannot have you hit by this storm, and they evacuate people. And that's here. It's more voluntary. Nobody comes in and carries you out here, but in Cuba, they're much more forceful about getting people out of the storm's path. That's why in Irma, when I think it was at least a dozen people were killed, I was literally shocked. It really said how bad Irma was to unfortunately result in fatalities in Cuba, because before it got to South Florida and the Keys, Irma took that wobble to the southwest there and brushed the northern coast of Cuba. So that speaks a lot for how bad Irma was. This data feed in the centerline track, you know, I don't know if that's available anywhere. There's a couple of things that I do here internally, but you know what, I could probably stream this afternoon just so you guys can tune in, and then there's no dialogue or anything. Maybe that's a good idea, right? A lot of interest on that. So I built some of these graphics internally because I thought, what do I want to show? What's the message? How do I most effectively convey the message? So so this is one of the graphics. Also my cone graphic, which shows where the storm goes as opposed to just where the point goes. So that's another graphic that I built. I don't think that's available on the internet unless I post it either. Chances of Naples getting the eye, you know, I would just say it's not impossible. I think the chances are lower for the center there in Naples than they are for, say, Fort Myers, and they're probably lower for Fort Myers than Sarasota, but we're talking kind of relative terms here. And if you're in Naples, you should be preparing. This is what 5 days of lack of sleep does to you. You should be preparing for hurricane conditions, just like you're preparing in Fort Myers, just like you're preparing in Sarasota, just like you're preparing in Tampa Bay. So there's no difference in the preps here. Everybody from Naples and Marco Island North is preparing for a hurricane. Okay, that's the way we do our preps. We don't. This is not like a tornado warning where we draw a little narrow area. This is a big event. It's a long duration event, and it's exhausting. And I know all of you are exhausted as well, and all of you who are evacuating are exhausted. Look, we're all in this together. Unfortunately, some of us are going to feel the effects much more severely than others. So let's see, moving east. Yeah, so we talked about that, a little bit of an update there on the track graphics. Let me do this, and let's go back just to reiterate one more time. So let me make sure I know what I'm doing here, and go back and just talk about the watches, because this is kind of new. A lot of people got notifications here. And what I'm going to do is, there's the top of the advisory, and I am just going to zip on through here. So you're going to see it kind of zip on by because I don't have a separate warning graphic. Okay, there you go. So now they've updated. Like I said, they probably would. You can see the hurricane warnings. Once again, there's the delay because the local offices have to issue the local watches and warnings there. So let's kind of go through this once again because I think it's important. So the keys. Middle keys and lower keys, and my arrow doesn't point down. Middle keys and lower keys. There's the lower keys, there's the middle keys under the tropical storm warning. Upper keys, Miami-Dade and Broward under the tropical storm watch. Remember, the difference between a warning and watch is a warning means the conditions are expected, whether it be if it's a hurricane warning, hurricane conditions are expected. If it's a tropical storm warning conditions are expected. The watch means it's possible. So the difference between likely or expected and possible is that it's not certain that it's going to happen, but it's possible. So once again, Miami-Dade, Upper Keys, Broward under the watch. Then going farther to the north, Palm Beach is now under the tropical storm warning, and that extends all the way up the coast, tropical storm warning. Southeast Florida here kind of still in this little island here, even though the possibility of tropical storm conditions is rising or has risen. It's not necessarily going to happen here. We're still down here as well as up there in the Panhandle now. I know folks in the Panhandle watching this very closely too. Hurricane warning here extends down through Naples. It's covered up a little bit here, but it extends down through Naples and Fort Myers as well as up to Tampa Bay, and now extends inland through Polk County. So, and I don't know why that in Naples doesn't say hurricane warning, because I'm pretty sure that is in the hurricane warning. Let me just check some of the local watch warning statements. So tropical storm warning is in effect for Boca. If you guys want to follow along with what I'm doing, I guess you can. Let me clear that little mark there. So I'm scrolling down here, and this statement you can get from the National Weather Service as well. So there's Metro Palm Beach, tropical storm warning. There is Inland Palm Beach, tropical storm warning. This is a long statement. It's a good thing this one doesn't print. Coastal Broward, tropical storm watch. Okay, so that's basically Metro Broward. On down to Metro Broward, tropical storm watch. We'll go on down here, and Inland Broward, tropical storm watch remains in effect. So that includes the Everglades, which earlier were in the tropical storm watch. Tropical storm watch in effect for coastal Miami-Dade. And you can go online, weather.gov/MFL for Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and you can find this bulletin, which is very long, and see the specifics. Tropical storm watch in Metro Miami-Dade. Inland Miami-Dade, tropical storm watch, and that includes places like Homestead and Kendale Lakes. Tropical storm watch, storm surge watch in effect for Everglades National Park. So that's far south Miami-Dade, basically along Florida Bay. This is Palmdale, Moorhaven. So this is Glades County, tropical storm warning, hurricane watch. This is LaBelle, so this is up by the lake, hurricane watch, tropical storm warning. Lake Okeechobee. This is Golden Gate, Immokalee, and so that's tropical storm warning, hurricane watch. So that is just east of Naples. Okay, and Naples, Marco Island, Everglades City, hurricane watch. So hurricane watch means possibility, tropical storm warning is in effect. So that is right on the razor's edge there for Naples and Marco Island. And what you can see here is that there is a marine hurricane warning right there, that little tiny red outline. So basically the coastal conditions are under a hurricane warning, but the land conditions are under a hurricane watch and a tropical storm warning. I'm glad we verified that. If I was in Naples, I would put my shutters up, plain and simple. That's basically it. I wouldn't wait for the warning. I wouldn't take chances here. Anywhere in Collier County, I would put my hurricane shutters up. And if you're in the storm surge zone there, where there was the storm surge warning, evacuate away from the storm surge area. So let's see, any more comments here? King tides. Yeah, so king tides do affect it. Tidal cycles affect storm surge, and the storm surge values that you read from the National Hurricane Center, that's over normally dry land. So basically land that's normally dry. It's not mean sea level, it's over normally dry land. We call it inundation, where water goes over normally dry land, and the depth, the possibility of how deep it will be over normally dry land. The tidal cycles, they play a big role here, but because we don't know exactly when and where the center is going to come ashore yet, we don't know what the tidal contribution is going to be. If the center comes ashore during a increasing, or we call it a flood tide, or a rising tide, or a high tide, that's going to be a worse storm surge situation. But I think the storm surge threat is so high that the tidal cycle will just make it worse than already a bad situation. If it will strengthen in the, oh yeah, I'll stream it. I'll stream it this afternoon. Thanks for asking. Seems like further right side of the forecast. That's what we talked about at the beginning of the stream. We're starting to get concerned with a hook right over South Florida. So that's a good question. I still don't think a hook right, or like a sudden turn to the right, is a possibility. there are, so hurricanes kind of still have to obey the laws of physics, right? They can't just suddenly shift and go against steering currents and things like that. They wobble, we know that. Wobbles can sometimes be 5 or 10 miles, and that kind of has a big impact, especially when, and let's go back to our line graphic here. I think this is our line graphic. Nope, that's our South Dade graphic. Let's go back to our line graphic here. And I meant South Florida graphic here. So, and let me zoom out here and we'll talk about this. So, two things may be happening here. Now, the Hurricane Center forecast track there looks pretty straight. So, and some of the models, if you looked a few days ago, showed two turns. It showed an initial turn to the northwest and then a turn more to the north. And maybe it just ended up its turn to the northeast there. So, is this motion possible here where it goes along to the north, does a little wobble to the right, goes on to the north, does a little wobble to the right, and those are big wobbles I'm drawing here, but I'm exaggerating just to kind of make the point. And then as opposed to, if you extended that line out there, it's to the right of that line. That's a possibility. I mean, that's something we're going to be watching. We've got it radar in the range of the radar now. We can watch very, very closely what it's doing, and we can compare it to the Hurricane Center's track. Is it possible that it continues kind of a gradual right turn here, where it's turning to the right like that? The end result of the wobbles and the right turn, they're basically the same. That's also a possibility. Is it going to do, and I know this is the concern in southeast Florida, is it going to do one of those? No, it's not going to do that. So that's not something that's a consideration. That's not something that's on the table. And in fact, when the advisory comes out, and I showed this yesterday, which in retrospect I thought was, I was just reading numbers and people were probably going like, oh, okay, Craig. So I will show you this. This you can find on the National Hurricane Center's page too. So these are the storm probabilities, the probabilities for your location. Fort Lauderdale, 64% chance for tropical storm conditions, only a 2% chance for hurricane conditions. West Palm Beach, 71% chance for tropical storm conditions, only a 4% chance for hurricane conditions. Miami-Dade, Miami specifically, not all of Miami-Dade, 52% chance for tropical storm conditions, 1% chance for hurricane conditions. So you can kind of see there that even the models that take into account a lot of possibilities, which is what this one does here, taking into account a lot of possibilities, doesn't have very high odds at all for kind of a right turn like that. Storming implantation, yep. We'll take a quick look at the radar once again. So that's the 11 a.m. line. The 5 a.m. line, I cannot compare it on this graphic here. Sorry. But this is it is a turn to the right there. Show the pressure systems and the currents. Yeah, I showed that. Yeah, I know, boy, everybody is really concerned about a southeast turn into southeast Florida. So it's probably worth restating here. So this is the European. The European, remember, was one of the more rightward leaning models. And when I say European, this is the European background here. So this is all the steering currents. That's Wednesday morning there. And in fact, I'm just going to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in. I don't think I'll be able to, well, I am going to be able to point after this. Okay, so this blocking high over here to the east, that is what has been steering. And you can see how it kind of actually reaches out there and then goes up like that. That blocking high is not retreating in a hurry. That blocking high is not saying, I'm out of here, opening up an opportunity for Ian to turn more to the east like that. It can't do that because that blocking high is going to be there. That's tomorrow morning's forecast. The blocking high is still there. The concern, of course, is that because there's this, let me zoom out a little bit here again, or at least show you that jet stream dip. Because there is that jet stream dip, and there is going to be a little bit more pressure from the southwest there, that Ian is going to want to try to wobble to the right there. Here it is right here now. It's going to try to want to wobble more to the right or gradually turn to the right. But it's not going to jog and make a big turn to the right there. Right. So, right, stay west of Southeast Florida. Now, when people say, well, are we going to get hit by it? Everybody has a different definition of being hit. And research, social science research, has indicated that most people consider themselves hit by a hurricane once they experience the tropical storm conditions. So most of Florida, 80% of Florida, at least almost all of the peninsula, is going to say we were hit by Ian. But when I think of being hit, it's that core part there, the area of the highest winds around the center. In my mind, that is being hit by the hurricane, or if you get into hurricane force winds, which extend out from the center there. In fact, let me just see the latest wind radii here on that latest advisory. I'll show you that as well. So I'm looking at the National Hurricane Center's forecast advisory here, and we're zooming down. So these are our wind radii now, and basically the hurricane force winds extend out about 30 nautical miles, so about 35 miles to the northeast of the center. So there's that center point, and then say about 35 miles out. That's the hurricane force winds. That is still relatively small, but it's going to be expanding. The hurricane force gusts, that's what we call the 50-knot winds. They extend out about 60 nautical miles, so that's about 70 statute miles, and just about everybody on land uses statute miles, right? And then the tropical storm conditions, they extend out about 120 miles. I want to say that Irma had tropical storm conditions that extended out 300 miles. So, and Hurricane Sandy, when it was between Bermuda and North Carolina, had tropical storm warnings on both sides of it because the tropical storm wind field was so wide there. Let's see, what time is the next update? So I'll do my next update at 4:30. You know what? We'll do it like we did it today, right? So I'll get on, we'll chat, let people come in and stuff. There'll be no sound. We'll just be looking at the radar loop there, and then we'll kind of get things rolling here, do the discussion, the analysis, the forecast track, and wait for the new advisory. And as you saw today, man, I had that advisory on quick. So if you wanna this afternoon, if you want to be one of the first to see the new advisory, I promise to do my best to get it on first here, and that's kind of one of my goals. So I think at this point, you know what, so I can save my voice for this afternoon, let's kind of wrap things up here. And remember, if you like what you're seeing, like it, click the little like button there, click the subscribe button, and click the notifications button so that when the stream comes on, again, especially this afternoon, because you'll probably get a notification if I just put up that track there. When the notification comes out, then you can get in right away. And then here's my other request. If you think this is helpful and valuable and could maybe help some people make decisions, share it. Get it out there on the internet. Let people know about it. This video, there's the link for it. What I will do is I will repost the link where it cuts out the beginning and just starts when we start the dialogue and stuff. So go to Twitter, find me on Twitter at craigsetzer.com. And I'll post that link in just a couple minutes. It'll take me a second to get it together. And that link will take out that first part where there's nothing going on, okay? So that'll help everybody there. So try and get some rest. Thanks, Olivia. I don't think rest is in my near future, just like most of everybody, not in the near future. So, okay, we'll see you again around 4:30 this afternoon. I will put the stream up there with the center for a while. Because that's my graphics computer, I'll have to take it down to prepare the afternoon graphics. We'll have to stop here, but I'll put it up for a little while just so some people can catch on there. That'll be the next stream that I put up here. So, all right, we'll see you this afternoon at 4:30.